All right, there we are. We are live. Okay, so I can see you, Kyra, but you can't really see me, can you?
I cannot.
Okay, so I decided that if this was good enough for Tony Robbins, this setup was going to be good enough for me. So rather than my guest being right next to me sitting, she's actually sitting right next to me, but she's sitting right next to me in Georgia. So I'm like holding on to her with my hand and the iPad so that it looks like we're sitting next to each other. But like I said, if it's good enough for Tony Robbins, it's good enough for us. So anyway, how is everybody? Hope you guys are doing well on this Thursday night. We are live. And tonight with me, I have my cousin, Kyra Osseroff, who specializes in eating disorders, and Kyra, you can discuss all of your initials behind your name, but works with preventing and treating eating disorders. And I think that this is such an important topic for us as parents to discuss, to raise awareness so that we understand what is happening to our children, what we can do, and what we may be doing that is wrong or what we're doing that is right. So one of the things that I feel very strongly about, and sort of my whole mantra with my parenting pioneers, is that we as parents, we are with our children the most. And they, regardless of what you think, they look up to us the most and look to us to model things. So really, I think when you and I were talking earlier, Kyra, the thing that just struck me was that you said we can prevent this as parents. We have to set up the proper model at home. And, if this child is sort of going down that road of an eating disorder, we can just sort of maybe autocorrect it by shifting a couple things. And so knowledge is power in this. So, and my sister says hi, by the way, since you can't see, she's on live and she wanted to say hi. Hi, Amy. So that's where I think is, and before we even start getting into that, I wanted to, I'm sorry, because I wrote a few notes. I wanted to first say that on this Saturday morning that I am going to be holding a donation only, and there's no specific dollar amount. Bring $1, bring $2, bring $100, but I'm going to be holding a boxing class, and it's linked on this website on my Facebook page. And come, box, give what you can, and I'm going to be donating it to the hurricane victims in Texas. And next Thursday night, I will not be here live. I am doing a parenting workshop at a yoga studio in Delray called Fizz. And anybody that wants to come out, please join us, my local peeps. We would love to have you. We're going to be talking about all things parenting in a super cool, relaxed atmosphere where we're sitting on the floor, drinking wine, basically like a girls' night out, but I'm going to be leading the discussion in all things parenting. So, having said all of that, welcome, Kyra. Say hi. Hi, Kyra. So tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do.
So I am a psychotherapist in private practice in a suburb of Atlanta, and I specialize in treating people that struggle with food, body image, eating disorder, and what I love to do, I think most, is work with families, helping their kids develop a healthy relationship with food, and hopefully providing them with some protection against developing this really scary, deadly disorder.
Wow. So I think that is so important in terms of prevention. And I think that is key. I think that you would be set for life if you lived in South Florida. And well, you're from here, so you know. Kyra grew up down here. So what are the things that we as parents, you can take us step by step as parents. And again, this is so in line with the way that I teach parents, that as parents, we have to be actively involved. And, that's not to say, it's the parent's fault that the child has an eating disorder.
It's not. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No. Absolutely. Go ahead.
I think that's what I want to make sure is heard, is that eating disorders are so complicated, and there's not one factor that causes an eating disorder. It isn't about fault or blame. it's about finding some meaningful responsibility and looking at what can we do to help, like you said, get us on a different track.
Yeah, and a meaningful response to...
There's no doubt, though, that they're very complicated, and it's a...
Holy shit, I'm sorry, my mother just joined. Holy shit. My mother has never been on my Facebook Live. Hi, Mommy. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Oh, I wish I could see everybody. They're complicated.
They're complicated.
So it is not the fault of parents if their child develops an eating disorder.
But isn't it nice to know that as parents that we can do something, that we are not powerless, that when we see that these things are happening in our family unit, that we actually are not powerless, that we have a lot that we can do. So that's what I really want to discuss.
And recognizing and knowing what our risk factors are,
right,
I think is so important so that we know what to look out for, and we know, what kind of wiring our kids come to the world with. If families have a history of eating disorder or addiction in the family, if there are a history of anxiety disorders, impulse control disorders like OCD, these are things that are, we can't change our genetics.
Okay, so if we have those risk factors,
we can know what they are, and we can try to. There's lots of things we can't do anything about. We can't do anything about our genetics. What's important is to identify what we can do something about.
Okay.
And there are emotional and environmental and social factors that contribute to the development of disorders, and that's where our focus can be.
Okay, so then let's discuss the things that we can do and take everybody through maybe the risk factors, what we do, how we respond to those different types of things. You had talked to me about the internal regulation, positive eating attitude, that sort of stuff. So we can take that off as like a jumping point.
Okay, so because eating disorders are so complicated and they're very difficult to treat, I don't think, we talk about it a lot, and so I don't think we realize how dangerous they are. The fact is that eating disorders are the deadliest of all mental illness.
Wow, I did not know
That's
that.
the highest mortality rate.
Wow, I'm shocked. So, and that's like including drug addiction?
Highest mortality
Whoa.
rate of mental illness.
I had no idea.
And 20% of those deaths are due to suicide.
Wow. And
So
that's a whole nother topic of where I'm going to be going with things is suicide. And we can start, that is a whole nother topic that I want to start addressing. But let us not digress tonight.
No. So the most important thing I think we can do is early intervention when we see signs and symptoms.
Okay. What are the signs and symptoms?
So if your child has become increasingly picky,
okay,
and you see
every child,
bowl or safe foods getting smaller and smaller, taking long time to eat, moving food around on the plate, weight loss, of course.
What about a child who, I'm sorry to interrupt you, what about a child who, so for me, Spencer is on the spectrum, the autistic spectrum disorder, and with that comes the innate picky eater and the struggle of it and the sensory integration factor.
That's something different. So we're talking about the kid who you see a drastic change, right? That went from eating pizza, spaghetti, being social, not caring, to slowly and over time limiting themselves to a smaller and smaller list of safe foods.
Okay.
That's something different than a kid who has been picky, has sensory issues.
Right.
And
what about a child that only eats junk food?
What about a child who only eats junk food?
Yeah. What do you do with that, who loves junk food?
So for all of these things, protective factors are helping our kids develop a healthy relationship with food from birth. And if we can do that, we've given them a layer of protection. Is it a slam dunk that we're going to prevent it? No.
Okay.
But does it make it more likely that they are protected and less likely to develop the disorder? Yes. And so what we're talking about is helping our kid become what I call a competent eater.
Okay.
A kid that has a healthy relationship with food.
Let's discuss what a competent eater is. So my friend Karen said, what about a junk food lover? So one of the big red flags would be a drastic change in their eating. But what we also want to discuss is how to avoid seeing that red flag. That's where we are right now, right, Kyra? We're going to discuss that.
And if we've already gotten into that place, you know what? Lots of people love junk food and enjoy eating, and we want our kids to enjoy food. We want them to feel good about it, and that's one of the characteristics of what we call a normal or healthy eater. And when I say healthy, I'm talking about an emotionally healthy eater, somebody who has a healthy relationship with food, who, one, has positive attitudes towards foods, enjoys food, looks forward to eating, isn't anxious about eating. Somebody who is in touch with their internal regulation skills, knows when they're hungry, when they're full, and is able to listen to that. Somebody who can make do, has a wide variety of food acceptance skills, and that's the opposite of a picky eater, right? That they can go somewhere and make do with what's provided, whether you're at a party or
flexible,
right? And it's okay if it's not the most satisfying or exciting of meals, but they can get by, and then they know they're going to be able to eat again at another time. And the last factor, the fourth one, is being able to manage for a kid, is being able to manage in the context of coming to the table hungry and leaving and moving on. It's that structure. And for an adult, that part is being reliable and dependable to feed ourselves. I sometimes talk to people about what we do when we have a baby. We pack a diaper bag. We think about how long we're going to be out of the house. How many bottles do we need? Then we do an extra bottle. How many things that we are so good about planning.
Right.
We aren't good about planning for ourselves. We aren't thinking about where am I today? How busy is my day? What am I thinking about later? What planning time and space to sit down and eat. So that context and structure piece, being reliable for ourselves and dependable.
Okay, let me ask you this. What role let's say that the parent has set up these 4 parameters that you sort of talked about: positive the child has a positive eating attitude, and they're internally regulated, they have food acceptance, and they have food within the correct context. What happens if the parent is having their own issues with food and constantly talking about food and the macros and the this, and they're vegetarian or they're vegan or they can only this, or and they themselves are talking about it and having that conversation? What role does that play on the children?
So a parent who is not what we would call a competent eater, and this term it's a phrase coined by a woman named Ellen Satter. Her last name is spelled Satter, and she is really just the foremost expert on childhood feeding. A parent who is not a competent eater, who doesn't have a healthy relationship with food, has a harder time creating the environment where their kid may have a healthy relationship with food as well. So when a parent is cognizant of their own issues, they've worked on them, or they are naturally a competent eater, they are able to follow what we call a division of responsibility, where parents have jobs with feeding and kids have their jobs with feeding. It's really about boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it all with parenting? Setting up the boundaries, the guidelines, modeling, and sort of...
That is why when I found Ellen's work early on in my career, it was such an impact for me. She was originally a dietitian and nutritionist. She became a family therapist about 50 years ago, and she has amassed this body of work and research. It's research-based, it is evidence-based, and best practice by the American Academy of Pediatrics. It makes sense. And
right.
really all about boundaries. And so as a therapist, it made so much sense to me that parents have certain jobs and kids have certain jobs. When parents are not competent eaters, what happens is they either do too little and expect the child to do too much of their job, or they do too much of the child's job.
The hoverer.
And so when we have interference with either too little structure or too much control, that's when we start to see power struggles over food. I used to do a workshop called Table Time Trials, talking about the power struggles over food and negotiating and bargaining and, 2 more bites of this before you get your reward, your dessert.
So that is totally wrong.
Think about when a kid has to work to get to the prize. They're going to eat it whether they're hungry or not. So they've already learned to override their internal regulation.
Ooh, that is so important, Kyra.
They're going to eat the dessert anyway because they worked damn hard to get to it.
Shit.
Whether they want it or not.
So what do you do as the parent when they don't want to eat anything healthy and they just want the dessert? How are you supposed to handle that? I mean, I think that has got to be the number one question.
I know, and people, when they first hear this, they look at me like I am from another planet. But
I really think all of us that make sense are.
So I really try to help people understand how not to use food as reward and punishment.
Oh my God, that's so huge. I'm sorry, but if we can take anything away from tonight's discussion, I swear to you, I think that is the most impactful thing we can.
Isn't that crazy though, how we use food for reward and punishment?
Right. You know what? If you sit here at the doctor, if you sit here at the doctor and you get your shots, I'm going to give you a lollipop. We're going to go for ice cream. We're going to get a treat. Anything. It's so embedded in the wrong way.
And I think here and there, when we do the quote right thing, I shouldn't even use that word right, but when we do the emotionally healthy thing most of the time, and nobody's perfect, and I have used food for reward at different times, and I think if it's on occasion,
balance, everything's balanced.
Sugar is an anesthetic, and it is pleasurable, and it does fix a boo-boo, but
a sleeve of Oreos.
Really what we're doing, though, when we give ourselves food, when we really need something else, is it's like when your kid skins their knee and they come in and what do they need, right? They need ice and they need a Band-Aid, they need us to clean it up, and they need lots of kisses. And when we give them food, we're like taking an ice cream cone and putting it on their boo-boo.
Yeah.
And it feels good. It's cold, right? And it numbs it, but it's not really what they need.
Right.
Right.
So what do we do? What do we do at the dinner table when we have presented our child? Now we have to again go back and the parents that have the luxury of having young children, they can get the proper education about doing it correctly. But let's say that the people that are watching this have older children. They maybe are in elementary school, middle school, high school. Maybe we have some adults that are watching. How can we shift it, Kyra?
Okay, so as our kids get older and they become more and more responsible for getting their own food, for making choices about meals and what's offered, they're more mobile, they're not with us all the time. It is definitely harder, but we can do it when they're with us. And the very most important thing is to model it.
Always. Oh God, it is.
Positive attitudes and beliefs. Looking at our own, how do we talk about our food? How do we talk about our bodies? Do we eat regularly? Do we make a different meal for ourselves than we do for the family because I'm not eating the food because it was made with butter or fat or whatever? It is blessing the food. I always bless the food.
Wow.
That's what it's about. It's about blessing the food. And I was working with, I will never forget this. It's probably now, it might be 10 years at this point ago. And I had this 14-year-old girl and her mom in my office, and the mom was pleading with her, "You're so beautiful, you have no idea what you look like," all these things, trying to get her to understand that she wasn't fat and that it's okay to eat these things. And this little girl said, "You don't eat these things, Mom. Like, we're eating dinner and you're having a sip with like vinegar on it." And Mom said, "Do as I say, though, not as I do. I want you to do better than me." And she didn't pause. She didn't skip a beat. And she said, "Monkey see, monkey do."
You know, we don't want to believe it. We don't want to believe it. But we do not, I think parents just truly do not understand the power they have to really shape the child.
It's true, because here's the thing. They look at us, they think we are, when they're little especially, not when they're adolescents, they think we know nothing.
Of course.
But when they're little, they look up to us, they think we know everything, we are perfect. When they hear us criticize ourselves or deprive ourselves, they think that's what they should be doing too.
Right. So what do you, say it again?
Just I'm seeing it younger and younger and younger. I mean, girls 5 years old are talking about things that there's the only way that they're hearing those things is from the people around them, whether it's parents, teachers, the role models, the people that are there. I mean, the word model is in that phrase, role. You are modeling
right
to them.
It's so true. You
do it. That's really, when you have older kids, you can't control them. You can only control yourself, right?
Right. So what do you do if you have certain dietary restrictions for yourself? So I'm not eating dairy.
Yeah.
I'm not.
And that's different. So when there's a medical issue, that gets explained and it gets incorporated. The most important thing, right? The cornerstone and bedrock of all of this is sitting and eating together and not feeding our kids separately, but sitting and eating together. So family meal. And that doesn't have to be dinner. It's not feasible all the time with how busy everybody is, but there is a way to sit and eat. And so I have families that sit and eat at the ballpark when certain kids are at practice and the other kids are sitting and, picnicking it on a blanket. It doesn't have to be a healthy meal at the table every day. But sitting and eating with your kids and
having conversations that don't revolve around the food.
That are pleasant. But you asked me a question and I forgot.
It was what do we do when the child sits at the table and they're like, I want dessert, and they haven't eaten enough of their dinner, that they really have just taken a bite, and because we don't want to use that dessert as the reward, that's the very first place that
if dessert is limited. So the way that we were talking about the family meal, and you asked about restrictions and when certain people have dietary restrictions. So let me just finish that.
Okay.
I would say to serve everything family style, and everybody's picking and choosing what they want from what is served.
So that's a great idea. So instead of plating the food for themselves, give the child the power to choose and to regulate. And I think this is also a very, very important thing to really, really hit on. And because this is something, again, that has to do with the balance of parenting and allowing your children the freedom to choose and not hover over them and do it for them, but give them enough structure and guidelines. So the structure and guidelines would be that this is what we're serving. We're having dinner. I have presented a nice, healthy atmosphere, and then let them choose how much they want and to decide when they're full.
It's a responsibility. So parents are responsible for the what, the when, and the where.
The what, the when, and the where. Those are the guidelines and the boundaries.
What, where. So what is offered. So everything that makes it to the table, or the what can be what menu it is because we're doing takeout tonight, or what restaurant we're going into, that's the what.
Okay.
The when, the time, be back by 6, we're having dinner. And the where, are we sitting at the kitchen table? Are we at a restaurant? Are we sitting on the floor? Whatever.
Okay. I love that. I think that's...
So the kids are responsible for the weather and how much.
I love that. I
Whether
think
they
that is
eat
so
and
important.
what they eat.
That's amazing, Kyra.
With the except, well, I wish I made it up.
It's still, you're telling us, so we think you rock.
So, okay, and I tell people, I know this was kind of shocking when I told you, but I tell people to serve dinner with dessert, unless dessert's going to melt, like ice cream. And there's a serving for everybody, one serving of dessert, if that's a dessert night. Some people do it every day. Some people do it 3 days a week. Some people do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever. Whenever you decide it's dessert, it could be fruit, whatever it is. But dessert is on the table with everything else. And if they have their portion and they eat that first and they eat it up, which kids usually do for a while when this new policy is implemented, because they think I'm the greatest.
Right.
For telling their parents to give them dessert first. And then they say, I'm still hungry. And then you say, well, there's plenty of food on the table.
And that's when the cauliflower and the broccoli and the chicken come in. Okay, so they think oh my God.
And I would say that there needs to be fat on the table somewhere in the food, because that's what is satisfying about a meal.
Right.
There has to be.
Butter, cheese, that kind of thing.
There has to be fat somewhere in there. That's what regulates hunger and satiety, is fat.
Well, thank God right now what's nouveau and in is fat. Eating fats, so I guess that's the good news. Okay, so I think that answers so many questions about the dinner time and how important it is to set up those guidelines, and that is, a way of preventing. Let me ask you, because I think this is so important. You had said, and again, this goes back to the parents sort of hovering. What happens when your child is heavy? What happens if you're starting to worry about eating habits or them not being able to internally regulate themselves? Or, you had given a perfect example when you go to the pediatrician and they say, oh, well, your child's in the 95th percentile for weight, and then the parent starts freaking out. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and what we as the parent, how we should respond?
Sure. So it's scary. Let me just say that. When you have an authority figure, and these people that we trust, these experts who tell us certain things because research says X, Y, and Z about kids that are, at risk in the 85th percentile, or overweight considered 90th percentile, obese at 95th. What we're looking at is a data point, one moment in time. And the only way to diagnose a child who is overweight is by looking at data over time. So everybody looks at their growth chart, their kid's growth chart when they go to the pediatrician, and they get their growth chart and they see all these data points. And if a child is growing normally, there's usually not cause for concern. But when we see steep weight acceleration, jumping, I call it changing orbit, jumping curves. So they've gone from the 50th percentile to the 75th percentile to the 90th percentile, and you see that. That's when we start looking at what's going on. There is something that's happened usually there's been interference in the feeding relationship, or there's been scarcity. And, most people that I work with, I would say most, who can pay my fee or whatever, they have, food is not scarce, right? We're not in a third world country. There is clearly an abundance of food. But we don't have to be poor to have been food insecure, what we call, when there's been caloric restriction. So if we are worried that our kid is going to be overweight, and we, again, interfere in that feeding relationship and are trying to do our kid's job, which is the whether and how much, right? So if we're controlling the how much.
We go back to that. So now the doctor has put the fear of God in you and said, your child is in the 95th percentile and they're at risk for obesity.
So alarmed, and we get scared, and usually that anxiety causes us to interfere and do more than our job because we're scared. And that usually exacerbates the problem. And then what happens is when we started to limit or control, even with a look, like, do you really need that?
Nonverbal.
You just ate, all of that. Then we start finding like wrappers and kids hiding food. And that's a clue that something's gone amiss in the feeding relationship. We have to assess what has gone on. Where did this start? What's happening? And usually, if we haven't gotten to the place of disorder yet, I help parents and I coach them to implement this feeding dynamics model, to restore a division of responsibility so that over time the child trusts that they're going to have access, regular and reliable access to food, that they don't have to be food insecure, and that they don't have to eat it all right now because they know and trust there's going to be another opportunity. Not that it's so taboo and there's bad food that they're not going to be able to get, but over time, and usually they overeat for a little while because they're not sure if they
Absolutely. Listen, when I brought Peyton home from China, she was in an orphanage for 10 and a half months. She gorged everything. Yeah, you remember, right? She gorged everything. And I just, I kept trying to let her know that there was an abundance of food and that we didn't have to be in such a big hurry to, shove it all down. And say that again?
Such a perfect example.
Okay. Yeah. So, understanding that they will self-regulate at some point and that needle will go back to middle.
It can be restored. I mean, that's a beautiful thing, is that we,
Hope.
over time, it takes time, but it can be restored.
That's perfect. That is amazing. I think that gives people a ton of hope to understand that it's not a lost cause and there's a lot that can be done. And like I said in the beginning, to know that we as parents have control over some of these things and that we can intervene and try and, like I said, put that needle sort of back to the middle and bring balance, restore balance back into the family unit. And, it may affect one child more than another. Why is one child versus the other? You can't explain those types of things. It's what? I didn't hear you. What'd you say, Kyra?
It's so complicated.
Yeah, it's so complicated. Absolutely. So, but, and it's the same thing with the work that I do. Why is one child having anxiety and another not? Well, it doesn't mean that you are a bad parent or that you've done something wrong. And like I've always said with everything that I've gone through with Spencer, that I wasn't a bad parent and he wasn't a bad child. He just came with a separate set of challenges that I had to learn how to navigate appropriately. Right. So it's the same thing with the food. These are really good basics that all parents should be doing and setting up so that their children have a healthy relationship with food. And, if one gets off course, that we can try and bring them back. So my question then is, can people get in touch with you? Do you do online coaching? Is everything in person? If people have questions?
So therapy takes place in my office, but I definitely coach people on how to bring the models and institute the models. So feeding dynamics, coaching can happen online for sure.
Okay.
When I work with people, if they're not able to implement some of the things and it looks like they need more and they need to find, an expert that specializes in some of the obstacles that are getting in the way of implementing those things, then I would refer people to somebody locally.
Okay. So why don't you tell everybody your website in case anybody wants to get in touch with you?
Sure. It's Kyra Osteroff.
Kyra, come on, let's spell that. Are you kidding? No one knows how to spell Kyra Osteroff. Give it a rest, girl.
I know. So Kyra, Keira, and Osteroff, Oseroff.
F. Okay.
Like French fry.
Like French fry. Like you can have it in moderation. So clearly I need to, because anybody that listens to any of my Facebooks know that I have a little regulation problem with my Oreos and the sleeve of Oreos that I like to eat. So, it happens to all of us. So anyway, I would like to thank you profusely. This was so, so, so enlightening. And like I said, I just think that it's so great that as parents, we can do something for our children and be part of the answer and part of the prevention and really take an active role in this, and how important it is to model really all things for our children and be the best example that we possibly can be. So that is it. And I will, Kyra, what you can do is if people have questions, any more questions, they can write in the comments and you can go in and answer them. My friend Sherry said, Kyra, Garen Oseroff, amazing advice. And Aunt E, I saw you were on. Hi. So Kyra, if you guys have any specific questions, she'll go in and answer them. You can message her. She's on Facebook. Her business is on Facebook. So make sure that you find her if you have any additional questions, or you can reach out to me and I can connect you, whatever you guys want to do. But it's important, if you do have questions, concerns, any of those things, the sooner you get to it, the better it is for everybody.
And thank you, Elise. I so appreciate you having me, and I just wanted to mention that there is a description in the blog section of my site, a description of eating competence and the feeding dynamics model. They can read about it. If they have any questions, I will answer them.
Okay, perfect. That is amazing. All right, guys. So have an amazing, amazing weekend. And like I said, come join me 11 a.m. on Saturday. I am teaching a donation boxing class that all the proceeds will go to the hurricane victims in Texas. Next week, Facebook Live. No Facebook Live. I will be doing a parenting presentation at Fizz in Delray. So come join us, have a glass of wine, chill out, talk to some other chicks about being a parent. That is it. I will see you guys in a couple weeks. Goodbye. Oh, wait.